Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you have things that you need to get around, like a project? Maybe you want to redo your kitchen, build a pergola, or maybe your roof was damaged when the last windstorms come, or maybe they're going to be damaged. Check out Chris Helms at K&H Construction. They're a local company out of Waxahachie, and they'll take good care of you. Let them know DV LeBron sent you. Check out K&H. So today, my very, very special guest is Mr. Ed Gardner, former Midlothian City Councilman. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, DV. Beautiful day.
Good to have you on, my friend. You went ahead and decided you wanted to throw yourself in the gauntlet that is Ellis County politics again. You must be a masochist.
Yeah, absolutely. Either that or I'm just stubborn. I don't ever take a no for an answer. So
Yeah, I get that. I definitely get that, my friend. So, there's a lot of new houses and stuff, and maybe people that don't know you. So, can you give an intro on yourself?
sure. I've lived in Midlothian for about 20 years. My wife is the optometrist up at Walmart, has been there since it was built. We've got two girls at MHS, and I'm a former Navy veteran. I am a businessman. I worked for Hewlett Packard and Nokia, and left the corporate world to start my own business here in Midlothian, which unfortunately I couldn't afford to keep here, and I had to move out of town. But I've had a long love with this community, and I wanted to serve, and so that's what got me into local politics. And I've been fighting like heck for the community. I'm I just want to see that it grows in a way that's not going to turn it into something that we don't want.
Yeah, I can understand that, and there are some people who complain. I mean, it's growing so fast, and like just about every single piece of land is going to be on. Something's going to be on it, and folks, people are selling that land, so people are buying that land and they're building on it. It's kind of one of those deals. It is capitalism, but it is
Yeah.
a lot. There's a lot going on in the city and how it's growing. The future. I guess there's a TSTC getting ready to be put here. That was the most recent announcement. Lots going on. But you served on the city council, and you did that for how many years did you do that, Ed?
I only had 1 year. I came in on a special election to fill the vacated seat from Justin Kaufman when he left his seat to run for mayor. There was 1 year left on that term, and that's the year I served.
Yeah, it seemed
And
like you were running for like 4 years.
yeah, I know.
It
Well,
seemed-
when you have a message that is popular with the people but not popular with business and with or I wouldn't say with business, with, dare I say, the establishment, they tend to have a lot of resistance to you running for office. When I originally started into this, I was told by people on the council that, well, you have to serve on boards, you have to do this, we have to groom you, make sure that you are the type of person that we want to run for office. And I was discouraged from running for office. And that just made me want to run harder. And because then I knew that there was a problem and that we
well,
had to fix it.
well, thank you
So
for wanting to serve your community, Ed, and continue serving it because you served in the Navy just as myself, and I love you
absolutely.
for that shit, mate. That's an awesome thing to have served in the Navy. Proud thing. Um, Going into the things that are going to the city, let's go into growth. As you notice, this place is growing, as I was mentioning earlier, and they're building, and there's things going on with growth. What were some of the things that you tried to do while you were on council, and you were just one guy in the council,
Yeah.
and what would you like to see different on the way that Midlothian is growing?
Well, you know, coming from a background of 20 years in this town, I've watched it go from just a little tiny, community to, a powerhouse. It's growing like mad. And, one of the biggest things for me was, I tried to avoid high density. I mean, I think that high density, putting people too close together makes bad neighbors. It really does. I mean, it's the old adage of rats in a cage, you know. Well, you put a couple of rats in a cage and they're fine. You shove a whole bunch in and they start eating each other. It's not a healthy environment. So, you know, all in all, I think that that avoiding growth is a high priority. You know, I did that by, you know, opposing the changes to plan developments that were not consistent with our design. You know, we have a master plan that we created that says this is what kind of densities we want to see in these areas. This is what we want to see happen. This is how we want it to lay out over time. You know, we don't control what comes in the sense that you know, the city doesn't go and build houses or build apartment complexes. What we do is we zone and we set aside, you know, certain areas, and we say we'd like to see businesses come into this area, and we create zones for those businesses. We create, you know, downtown more dense zoning so that, you know, the people that want to live in that more dense area can. Where in the outer areas of town, we have, you know, a more, you know, 1 acre or 2 acre per home zoning. The issues where I fought the most was where we had zoning that was set up for those larger areas, and we came in and you know, people came in and was trying to get approval to put higher density than what our plan allows. And the problem I have with that is we built this plan. This is what everything works off of. You know, all of our planning for roads or infrastructure for everything is based off of that plan. And when we violate that, when we don't stick to the plan, we cause problems. And they're not problems that happen today. You know, we cause this problems that happen 10 years, 15 years down the road. Most of the extreme high development that we're seeing in Midlothian, where the really tight, you know, zero lot lines, that took place, you know, 10, 15 years ago. Those decisions were made. And now we're feeling the pain from it. So, you know, the biggest thing that I did while I was on the council, and what I plan to do again, is to make sure that we have a good plan going forward and that we stick to the plan, and that we create basically an understanding of what we're going to require from these builders. Because a lot of the times, you know, we're designing for them. In other words, they come to us and say, I'd like to build this, you know, whatever it is. And we put up so many regulations and roadblocks to them that they have to come to the city, they have to come to the council, and they have to beg for approvals to do this. And by doing that, we can drive all these changes into what they're doing. Right. And the problem with that is they come in, they spend a lot more money trying to develop something that they meant to, because they end up, you know, having to go through so much more roadblocks. It takes longer for the project to get done. And they end up having to put in more houses per acre in order just to get their money back, because we're putting all this over design on them. Mm-hmm. It's a really frustrating problem. And it all comes from not having good boundaries, you know, not saying this is what we want here. This is what you can do on that property. Have at it, and letting free market take over.
One of the center points of the growth in this town, or in Midlothian, has been what your sign is, what your background is there. That's the original background of downtown. Downtown has changed quite a bit.
Yes, you know, it has.
I can see the background. It has changed quite a bit. And so I want your thoughts on how the city's proceeding with downtown. What would you like to see if you were elected happening downtown?
Well, downtown has received a lot of attention, you know, recently. A lot of love. There's been, you know, a new city hall being built, that's built and up and running. We've got a new public safety office that's being built, that's still under construction. A lot of the roads are getting rehabbed. Businesses are being moved. We've got Founders Row that was created. You know, there's been a lot of focus on downtown. It hasn't been the same for the outer line areas. You know, you've got areas of town that are out, you know, the annexed areas that were brought in. Honestly, all they've received is tax bills. They haven't got anything for their money. And that's frustrating to me. I think that all citizens should be represented evenly, and that, we need to be focusing on taking care of those outer areas. We're building new parks in town, but we're not taking care of the parks that are out in the surrounding smaller parts of the community. And so, I mean, frankly, it's nice to have a fancy, pretty downtown, but not at the expense of everyone else. And that's kind of frustrating to me.
You have been part of tax and budget discussions, and I'll
I
tackle
have.
those separately. So tell me, what are your thoughts on taxes? What were your actions when you were in the council, and what would you like to see done when it comes to property taxes? Because so many people, I mean, every tax time, you never see during tax time when people get their tax bill, you never see, oh wow, okay, I got my tax bill, no big deal. Everybody's like, who can I get to challenge it? A
Yep,
lot of people are they're being taxed out of their homes, and while the city isn't the biggest part,
absolutely.
it's a portion. So talk to me about your thoughts on taxes, and how you would like to, if you're reelected, or if you're brought back to the council, what you'd like to see.
Well, I mean, if I'm being completely transparent, which, I always like to be, I think that taxation is theft. Any type of, except for like sales tax and other optional taxes, property tax, income tax, where they take that money, and if you don't give it to them, they'll come and take your property and they'll take your freedom. That to me is theft, and it's horrible. So that is the absolute last tax that we need to be enforcing on people. That being said, you know, unfortunately, we've got a system that it's embedded into, and we absolutely have to, you know, collect tax in order to be able to keep the lights on, so to speak. But we don't have to look for things to spend money on, which, when I was going through the budget season, one of the things that frustrated me the most in the year that I was on was that we came up with a surplus on our budget. And rather than give that money back to the citizens, which was required by law because we were over the allowable rate. We heard all this discussion about VATR and three golden pennies and everything with the school board. What they were asking for was approval to take more money than what, they were allowed to by law. Well, there's another mechanism for that other than going to the voters, which is what the school board did. And I applaud them for taking it to the voters, letting the voters decide. The city can also take out more debt. They can just take out another bond, and that raises the debt to income ratio, so that then they can hold on to that additional tax dollars without lowering your tax rate. And that happened while I was on council. I was the vote against the budget. I fought it for that, and because of the other issue on the budget, which was the council giving themselves a raise. Both of those things really did not sit well with me. And so, I did absolutely vote against the budget on those measures. You
Do you
know, the,
think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we could have easily dropped the everybody's taxes in town across the board. Now, the one concession I was able to get while I was on there, because I was outvoted on this, was that we were able to get, working with a couple of other councilmen, I was able to get the homestead exemption, which we'd never had for city residents, and also to improve the exemptions for seniors, and to get a disabled exemption as well. Those just didn't exist. And so, we did help out the voters a little bit, but not what we could have done, and not as much as we need to do in the future.
If you're reelected, you're going to be sitting on these budget talks or the budget that's, the cities are always in budget time, but they're getting ready to go into it in the nitty gritty. And you'd be getting there somewhere in the middle of that if you were elected to office. And so how will you, I mean, you talked about some of the things you like to see in the budget, but how would you handle it so that people that may not know you or may not have known you when you were a councilman, how do you look at the budget every year? Do you look at it as okay, what can I see? What can we spend less on? Or how can we provide the services? What approach do you take?
Well, first and foremost are priorities. You've got to look at what is it the government's supposed to be doing? Government is its sole purpose is to provide for infrastructure and social welfare in the form of security, and that's police and fire and ambulance services, and to make sure that they're working with the federal government, state government for roads and for all the infrastructure that we need. That's the core competency for government. And when it comes to budgeting, I want to make sure that first and foremost, that's what the money's going towards. If we're not doing that and we're doing something else, that has to change immediately. Second of all is you look at those items, I saw some really crazy things, take place. And as far as spending at the government level, and it's not all the time. I mean, for the most part, we have great staff, city staff that does try to, be responsible with the people's money. But I saw an instance of a change in projectors at the conference center where, we paid, I think it was $15,000 a piece just to unhook and rehook up a new, a projector. It was like, that's the kind of spending that just blows my mind. It's like, but it was buried in the line item. Nobody really read it. And I sat down and I read it. And I read the budget. I look for those things because that's those what we call nickel and, like people say, oh, well, you're nickel and diming. Yeah, it's because nickels and dimes add up to dollars. And so, when you go and you find all these things, these what somebody would consider trivial waste, and you add all those up, you save the taxpayers a lot of money. So if you're sticking to the priorities, and you're finding those instances of unnecessary spending, that's when you start to save money that we can then use towards additional infrastructure improvements instead of.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I definitely gonna ask you about the infrastructure, but just in this conversation about budgets, what do you think about the current city debt? And when you were sitting there in the debt, do you think that it's healthy? Do you think that we have a problem? Talk to me about your thoughts on city debt.
Well, our city likes to run at about 180 days of funds on hand. And so in order to do that, we have to maintain a healthy amount of debt to offset that money that we collect. So I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but we have essentially savings accounts for the city. But at the state and national level, there's some controls on those that say that you can't have too much cash on hand or you have to give it back to the voters. So in order to prevent that, a lot of municipalities are included will maintain a debt ratio in order to be able to keep those funds on hand. The mandated the amount that we're supposed to have on hand is 90 days. We keep 180 days, so twice as much cash as we're as what we're required to keep. And on top of that, the debt that we're maintaining, we're paying interest on. We're losing, that's cash that we don't have to spend towards actual infrastructure or new projects. That's money that's just going to bankers. It's just evaporating. But I keep getting told, well, if we don't keep that debt, if we don't keep a healthy debt, we won't have good credit ratings. And so then when we take out more debt, it's going to be more expensive. Well, the answer to that is stop taking out debt. Start paying with money on hand and start living within your budget. But who am I?
It does seem like a little common sense sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's just kind of frustrating, because when it comes to government, a lot of it is a self-licking ice cream cone. They build problems to solve problems that build more problems, and it's just this continual, it's like when they do, assessments against other cities. They'll look at, well, this city is spending this much on X, so we need to spend that much. But then that city turns around and uses our city. Well, they're now spending this much. We need to spend more based on that. And it just goes back and forth, back and forth. It's this feedback loop where everybody's just spending money because other people are spending money. And it doesn't make sense. You do what the market requires.
You were talking about infrastructure. So let's kind of look at that. Right now, I was talking to, when I had Mr. Whitcliffe on.
Yeah.
We were discussing about, I asked him, give me a ballpark of what it would cost to actually get everything that needed to be get done with the roads that need to be get done. And I know that you can never actually catch up, but just as it stands right now, what the roads need. And he said it probably would look somewhere like $100 million. Talk to me about,
I'd say easy. Yeah.
Talk to me about infrastructure in the city. What can we be doing better? What would you like to see?
Well, first off, before we build new infrastructure, before we go out and build new roads, or God forbid, we tear up a road we just built downtown to put in pavers. I don't know if you saw that at the last council meeting, but they're talking about doing that new park downtown. There's a brand new road going in front of City Hall, and they want to tear it up to put in a new road that looks different. So it looks nicer with the park. Before you do something like that, we need to take that money and go fix our roads. And, we've got all these areas around town. There's so many of our roads don't even have stripes on them. I mean, we're talking about, when there's fog and rain, people can't even see where the road is. And yet we're out here building new roads, continually building new infrastructure that we then have to maintain or should be maintaining. The fact is we need to take care of what we already have on hand. We need to take care of the infrastructure that we have that's out there that the taxpayers are paying us money to take care of. And that needs to come first. One of the big issues that drove me this time to run for office is that I feel like our current council, not all the councilors, don't get me wrong, but our current council and our current, our city staff drive the development and the projects. They're out there pushing these projects rather than letting the people say, we want this. I mean, I hear all the time, we want our community center or our civic center that we paid money for. Here it is. We put out a vote. We voted on it. It was approved. And yet we're not building that, but we're building all these other things.
Right. Now
it shouldn't be a decision of the city on what to build next or where to go. It should be the people. The people should be driving it. It should always be coming from the people. This is what we need in our community, and so therefore we do it. And those get funded by tax dollars through the form of bonds because people say, hey, I want this. Let's take out a loan and go do this. And they vote for it and it gets done. But the ad valorem taxes that we collect on a daily basis for homes, for property tax, that needs to be going towards maintenance and keeping our everything up to speed. We shouldn't have one road that's not, in good shape. But we do. And it's not because we don't have a good roads department. We've got a great group of guys working for the city. They just don't get the priority that they deserve.
Talk to me about it, because we've mentioned staff and the role of a councilman in accountability of the government, accountability of staff.
Mm-hmm. So the role of the council is to hold the city manager, who is our appointed person, accountable. And flat out, if there is an issue with staff, we have, problems where somebody in the local government is not doing what they're supposed to do, or they've done something wrong. It's the role of the city manager to deal with it. I mean, they are essentially the CEO of the company, and we, as the city council, are the board of directors. If the city manager we've got to hold his feet to the fire. And we do have a city manager that is he does have a very good understanding of what he needs to do, and he's very talented and very intelligent. Sometimes the messages we give him aren't very clear, and he doesn't have a very good direction to follow on things. Because unfortunately, when you get a group of individuals on a council, you have different opinions, which is a good thing. But through voting, through a consensus, we need to be able to direct him to direct staff to do what we want. And that is, if we want a smaller budget, we need to be able to drive him to decrease our spending. Or if we want roads to be the priority, we need to push staff through the city manager to take care of our roads first before we do take care of anything else. But ultimately we hire a city manager that is knocking stuff off the shelf here. We hire a city manager that's put there to do the job, and it's the council's responsibility to give them the guidance, support, and accountability that they need to do the job.
Do you think that the city is being as transparent as it could be? And what are your thoughts on transparency?
I don't think any government is ever as transparent as it should be or could be. I mean, frankly, and it's not out of like malicious behavior. Generally cities, municipalities are like any organization. They protect themselves. Somebody throws a blow at you, you put your hands up. It's generally people don't just sit there and so when it comes to transparency is a defensive mechanism. And generally it's used, or a lack of transparency is a defensive mechanism. And it's used by organizations to, essentially protect themselves from liability, from, people giving them a hard time. They tend to hide. You see that more and more, especially the larger an organization gets. People that you end up, like now we have bulletproof glass in some of our offices in the city, where they're behind that. And then, they're talking through an intercom, and pretty soon it'll be, you send a text message or a email, and that's the only way you can ever talk to someone. Transparency is fundamental to public trust. And unfortunately, the first reaction for most organizations is to go the opposite direction, which leads to distrust. It's not that always that they're, that people are doing something wrong when there's a lack of transparency. A lot of it is that they're just afraid that they're going to get beat up. And
and beat up, they will. I mean, there's some people who beat up, they will. Now, I wanted to ask you, business, because you are a businessman and you've run a business and you know what that is about. Do you think that the city is handling business and business attraction right? What would you like to see different, or what, do you like how the city is doing it right now? What would you like to see?
Well, the way that we use regulations is similar to what I was saying earlier about zoning and ordinances. We've set it up so it's difficult for businesses to come in and flourish here. So, which it's not a problem for a big chain corporation, somebody that, another national chicken chain to come in here and to use their lawyers to work through the process and to get approvals and all that. But for the average Joe, the average person off the street, it's tough, man. It's not easy. We need to simplify our regulations. We need to reduce the amount of roadblocks that we put in front of business, make it easier for them to operate, make it smoother. Because otherwise the only thing that we end up having is all the national chain places that we have in every other town around us. And it's the same thing. Well, you can't, you don't even know when you've left Midlothian and you've entered into Cedar Hill or Mansfield, because everything looks the same, because those are the only entities that can survive in this type of an environment. So we need to make it easier. We definitely need to make it easier than it is now. Things need to be better documented. And frankly, we need to kind of get out of the way and let them do their thing.
If you were elected, what can small business people expect from you on start? Would you like incentives done for small business to be able to open up in the city? What would you like to see if you were one man council? What would you change?
Well, the first thing I would do is to simplify the regulations. So I would go back and say and simplify it, not only in terms of what they're required to do, but also in the our expectations of them. So simple checklists that a new business can they can show up to City Hall, get handed a checklist that has 5 items on it that they need to get their certificate of occupancy to run, and have it everything clearly stated, simply stated as to what they need to do, and to make it, affordable and simple for them to get into business. Because frankly, when we have small businesses here that are started by our community, that money stays in our community. If Joe next door starts a business and you pay him, the profit that he gets from that business, he turns around and he spends in our community. When you give Walmart money, it goes, other than wages to the people that are in, all the rest of the profit goes right out of the city, out of the state, and who knows, maybe even out of the country. I don't know, but it doesn't get reinvested into our community. And so by making it simpler for those guys, which is what I would do every way possible. Part of that is, we have our A board and B board, which operate on sales tax. They don't operate on property tax. So in other words, they're not taking money out of your bank account from the valuation of your home to fund those boards. Those get their money through, when you go out and buy dinner in town. You pay a percentage of sales tax, that money goes to these organizations. I would like to see more investment focus for those two organizations on small business and making it, through grants, from that sales tax money towards helping small businesses. I would like to see, more of an effort put from them on focusing on the smaller businesses and the local businesses rather than going out, which I know are, the primary focus for them by law is supposed to be bringing in large business. But who's to say we can't find large business here or make large business out of some of our small businesses? So
yeah, the one talk that happened, that I've heard throughout the years is about abatements for these companies and those kind of incentives. Do you think that the city itself has to be doing that anymore? And if you were part of the council, if you're elected onto the council, would you support anything like that or any kind of restrictions on that?
No. So I don't think abatements are necessary. No. I mean, here's the deal. When it comes to a business's decision, a business is going to come if it makes sense to them. What little we do in terms of abatements is not going to change NVIDIA from building a plant here. If they want to build a plant here, it's because we have the conditions that they see favorable, and that's how they're going to build. If they're deciding based on the little incentives we can offer, no, we don't need that. I mean, not in terms of abatements. Especially not for those large corporations that can afford it. I just really don't see that as being a healthy way of spending our money. So
something that is hitting the community big right now, though, and this goes into the whole planning thing, and that is the MUDs and kids and stuff, and they're coming and they're wanting to, and I guess we had lost, or Midlothian lost a lawsuit with Bridgewater, and they're stacking homes right on top of each other. They got their own little sewage plant, I guess, in there. Talk to me about your opinion on MUDs and what the state's doing with that.
Well, I'll tell you, we should definitely be working with all the other municipalities, to try to band together and fight this at the state level, because, it is absolutely going to create havoc in our community. We have a mud coming in on the south side of town that's, virtually going to double the size of the city's population. They won't be Midlothian residents, but they will be, shopping in our towns, driving on our roads. Kids will be going to the schools. It's going to be tough. And that's not something that we could control. When I was on the council, we did what we could to structure things and to make sure that, by increasing zoning in that area or tightening up the zoning, we did what we could to help soften the blow and to structure it. But we really are kind of being thrown under the bus by the state in this regard. When they basically say carte blanche, that these communities can be built wherever they want, and we have to pick up the pieces. It's pretty darn tough. So
that is a major issue. They're actually building one. Supposedly they want to do right down on Ovilla Road, and that's not in Midlothian, but right down Ovilla Road, there's a developer that wants to have put their own sewage plant in there. And then they want to have high density, they want houses, they want a warehouse or something, some industrial, all right there on Ovilla Road. It's a 2-lane road. I know they're going to open it up. I get it. That's going to be years from now, but it's still all down Ovilla Road, and they want to do that. So,
and they're going to put a sewage treatment plant right around our current residents. In fact, there's a group of them that are fighting this right now. That they've put together a 501(c) corporation to fight that specific mud, and my heart and sympathy absolutely goes out to them, and my support, because I would hate to have that built in my backyard personally.
One of the main functions of government, and you said this earlier, and I forgot to ask you, is the law enforcement, is the emergency services. Do you think that we're doing what we need to do with policing and fire and emergency services? What would you like to do differently, or what do you think that we can do?
Well, one of the things that, in fact, I'm not sure exactly where we stand on it right now, but that's the rural fire districts that we work with to provide fire service into our ETJ, our extraterritorial jurisdiction. Right now, we have an agreement with rural fire service to provide those services. And I don't know how that's going to shake out. It's something that needs to be decided, because we either have to essentially say we're going to build these fire stations ourselves, or we have to pay somebody else to do it. No matter what, they're going to get built. My recommendation was that we hand it off and we allow, the rural fire districts to run those. We step out of those contracts. We take care of our residents, which is what we're obligated to do. And we let the county take care of the residents that the county's obligated to take care of. And, the MUDs will have to negotiate and take care of fire and, to that degree, police. Unfortunately, when the MUDs come in, it's going to put a strain on our police department and our fire department. We do have this brand new, beautiful, public safety building that's being built, but a building alone is not going to do it. Our police, we're going to need to hire more. Our fire, we're going to have to hire more. We're going to have to better equip and better train them, to respond to the increased demand that they're going to be under.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love our guys. I'll tell you, first responders, my first love, I should say. It's like I work with through my business, I work with a lot of the police departments and fire departments in the whole DFW, Metroplex. And, of course, everybody gets discount. All of them get discounts in my business, and I help do their retirement, stuff, and do all kinds of things with them. But at the end of the day, they have to be the focus, because when it comes to our core responsibilities, it's infrastructure and it's fire and police. That's what government's supposed to be here doing. We can control a little bit of zoning and stuff like that, but the rest of it, the majority of what we're supposed to be doing are those things: infrastructure and security.
Well, I could talk to you all night, but unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this. So
Already?
yeah, we're coming to the end. I'm sorry, I'm so long-winded, but I wanted to go ahead and give you the mic so you could speak directly to the voters of Midlothian, and just give them your piece.
All right. Well, thank you.
No, I mean,
Yeah, I know. Hello, Midlothian. I'm running for office because I love this town and I want to make it a place that we all want to call home. While it's great here and we love Midlothian, we have a lot of challenges ahead. Our infrastructure, we talked about it, mainly are the roads are just not what they need to be. Crime is on the rise, and traffic accidents and all the traffic that we see. Our taxes are out of control. I mean, we all know that. We all feel the pain. We all just got our assessments. We have about 15 parks in the town, and most of the small ones aren't getting the love they deserve. But, most of these challenges are because we've had a huge population explosion we just weren't ready for. But, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. The good news is that these things can be addressed with good planning and good priorities. Now, we need to put our tax dollars towards repairing our roads before we build new ones. We need to ensure our police and fire departments have the tools, training, and personnel they need, not just new buildings. Yeah. We need to make sure that our existing parks are given the love that they deserve before we build new parks.
Yeah.
We need to be sure that we're only collecting the taxes that we need, and that money is going to priorities and the priorities that the people set. We need to make it easier for small local businesses to flourish. Yeah. Not just the big chains. That money stays here in our community, and it's a good thing. The sales taxes that come from the increased local businesses help to offset the stuff that's going to come from property tax. So if you elect me, I'll make sure we keep our priorities straight at City Hall. I'll work to lower your taxes. I'll ensure there's no wasteful spending. I'll make sure that all the outer lying areas of our town receive the same attention as our downtown does. Most importantly, I'll make sure that the government is working for you and not the other way around. So please come out and vote for me, Midlothian. I really need your support. There's hardly anybody shows up to our local elections, and your vote counts. Election day is on May 3rd, with early voting on the 22nd through the 26th, and the 28th and 29th. So please, Midlothian, come out and vote for me, Ed Gardner, for City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ed. I really do appreciate it. Can you stick around real quick after the show?
That's it.
That's
you still there?
I'm there. Can you stick
Oh,
around?
I lost you.